Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. The Lakers dropped their preseason opener by 30, but it wasn't quite as bad as it seemed. Plus, just how close were the Lakers to making the Indiana deal before training camp started? All of that next on Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. Sometimes on weekends, always free, Andy. No matter how or where you get your podcast, it's never going to be behind a paywall or any kind of wall, really. Is in front of all the walls. Make another Locked On podcast your second listen of every day. I noticed, Andy, maybe you did too. The horns, the rhythm guitar, and the theme, all of it has a little bit of extra pep when the games actually begin. They did on Monday. The Lakers kick off their preseason with a game at home against the Sacramento Kings, hosted by former Lakers head coach Mike Brown. So a lot to talk about with that. Plus, Andy,
featuring a few former Lakers as well.
Yes, that's true. There was a lot of Lakers connections going on with this game on Monday. Plus, Andy, a lot of reporting from The Athletic on the Russell Westbrook to Indiana deal that still might be, but hasn't been yet, and just how close it was to happening. Plenty to unpack with that in ways that will probably get some fans upset. But let's start with the game. We mentioned for Monday's show that context matters when talking about the score of a preseason game. I think this is evidence of that. The Lakers lose 105-75, which looks really bad. But it is not as bad as it seems, because the important part of the game, which really was the first quarter and then parts of the second, the Lakers look encouraging. Certainly, at the very least, Andy, I would say there were encouraging things that came out of it.
Yeah. To begin, the big three of LeBron, AD, and Russ were out there.
They played, yes.
As we discussed during Monday's show, there was not nearly enough of them in the preseason, much less enough of them in the preseason together. And they all played around 15 to 16 minutes. And the majority of those minutes were actually as a trio, which is something I know we both wanted to see. As a trio, I thought they actually looked pretty good, for the first game of a preseason, especially considering the context of last year. For a variety of reasons, they did not look good together at all. In this game, I thought they looked much more fluid. Darvin Ham talked after the game about the sets that he's been looking to run, in the half court that are meant to synergize the three of them. And they're specifically designed so the three of them work together and ultimately accentuate each other. And, I have not seen nearly enough of this to know exactly what he's talking about, but I will say they looked much more comfortable together as a trio than they did certainly at the start of last season. And one thing that I found about it really striking was a lot of that work as a trio, and this was something you and I had hoped to see, so I was happy about this, involved heavy doses of AD. Like Anthony Davis was really the focal point of the LeBron, AD, Russ trio, and he looked good. And I thought they looked good while they were playing that way.
Yeah, AD 11, 16 minutes for AD, 11 points, 11 rebounds, 2 assists. He hit 2 of his 4 3-pointers, which is significantly better than he did. And
yeah, it's almost triple what he did last year. Triple the percentage.
You got to be better than 18%, and so he's off to a good start there. But, you're right. I mean, LeBron missed all 7 of his shots. Russ hit 2 of his 3, both of those at the rim, going downhill at the basket.
I thought he played a really controlled game, Russ.
I thought Russ looked good. And, it was one of those things where, look, the first 3.5 minutes of this game were the highlight. I mean, the Lakers came out hot, and Kendrick Nunn hit a 3 to start things off, and he was 4 of 7 from the floor. We've got to remember this first competitive game Kendrick Nunn has played. Did he get into a preseason game last year?
He did get into a preseason
got
game
one
last year.
preseason game last year. So, but it's been a minute. So, that was an encouraging sign. The Lakers, of course, went with that Damian Jones, Kendrick Nunn, along with Westbrook, James, and AD to start the game. And it just, they were very aggressive. They moved the ball quickly up the floor. There were a few times you saw Anthony Davis grab a rebound and push himself. So, I mean, I think the directive to get the ball up the floor, to get moving, to try to be active offensively was there. I mean, there were moments to me, Andy, when it looked like I'm not quite sure what the goal is offensively. First game of the preseason, they would alternate between, ooh, that nice ball movement, good action there, whatever, and a lot of standing around. But overall, I thought the energy was better than anything we saw in the preseason last year. Low bar to clear. I thought AD looked very engaged and very good. And there were positives.
The Lakers, you talked about this, Brian. This was something you wanted to see as a benchmark in terms of really gauging the preseason and, sort of trying to figure out what, if anything, to take from it, because, the scores can get and the results can get really lopsided depending on who ends up playing certain minutes as the game goes along. The Lakers were playing guys that are either going to be very far back into the rotation or maybe not even on the big club.
The second half,
maybe not even on the little
second
club.
half starting lineup for people who didn't see the game was Damian Jones, JTA, Nunn, Cole Swider, and Max Christie.
But the way you phrased it was, and I think this was a great way of looking at it, they need to win the minutes that LeBron, AD, and Russ played together. They did.
Mm-hmm.
They did not dominate, but they controlled the minutes that the three of them were out there together. They were clearly the better team with the three of them out there together. Again, not perfect, not trying to overblow the importance of all this. Although as I tweeted out, like the Lakers could have quit for the entire season. Like the 2022-2023 Lakers could have just said, good night, everybody, after that first quarter, and it still would have been more satisfying than all of last season. Like, because the give a bleep factor was actually there. Like, they actually cared about what they were doing out there, which, forget about the preseason. The Lakers spent 3 quarters or more of last season not looking like they gave a rat's ass about the actual season, or just expecting to wake up one morning as a 5 seed.
Yeah, you and I had similar thoughts about this whole thing. I tweeted out that, given how last season went, it's completely appropriate for Lakers fans to get wildly, enthusiastically irrational and overreact to the first 3.5 minutes of the first preseason game, which is good because the second 3.5 minutes of the first preseason game were not good. But that you could just chalk up to its preseason; it doesn't matter. But there, it was interesting to see little stuff. Our friend Harrison Fagan, who is going to be on the show with you on Wednesday.
Yes.
For
Thursday.
For Wednesday show for Thursday. Yeah. Following Wednesday night's preseason game. And he made, somebody had pointed out on Twitter, it's just like the movement of the Lakers centers when Damian Jones and Thomas Bryant played, who, by the way, and ended up playing a stretch together, which I thought was kind of interesting. I'm wondering how much we'll actually see of that during the season. Lakers, Darvin Ham deployed a lineup went about as big, for all the talk of going little. They went about as big as they could with Damian Jones, Thomas Bryant, JTA, Reeves, and I forget which other guard. I think it was Pat Bev. That's pretty big, but the amount of movement the Lakers got from their centers and the activity with Jones and Bryant, and it wasn't all great, but it was and Harrison's response was in the sense that they moved, they literally moved, so stuff like that, like the roster. Here's a good way more spry because they had guys like Damian Jones, who you see isn't necessarily a great rebounder because he's never on the floor. He's always just bouncing around. Bryant missed up, and we'll get to the rebounding here in a minute, but just like the activity level they look like a more spry and athletic group than last year because they are a more spry and athletic group than they were last year.
I mean, here's one way I could think about it. Wenyen Gabriel, who, minutes are going to be difficult for him to come by on this team, but he's somebody that you can always count on to bring just serious nonstop energy when he's out there. Like, he plays his ass off and
No question
tries to get the most out of his, by NBA standards, limited talent. The Lakers, I thought, did a good job of matching Wenyen Gabriel's energy in this game.
His energy and athleticism last year stuck out like a sore thumb, like in a good way, but like a good sore thumb. In this game, he looked like everyone else, which is good.
Yeah.
Let's talk a couple other details about tonight's game, Monday's game, and then we'll get into this whole Indiana thing. We'll do that next.
Locked on Lakers brought to you by Built Bar. Built Bar Puffs, they are sweeping the nation. And as always, because they are never satisfied, the bakers/chemists in the Built Bar labs, they are coming up with new flavors all the time. And right now, you're talking about cookie dough chunk puffs, a light, chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and as always, covered in 100% real chocolate. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it, and especially without the hassle of the cleanup. You've got more important things, more pressing issues to take care of in your life. Plus, unlike regular cookie dough, this is healthy for you. Only 160 calories, 15 grams of protein. And what's great about the Built Bars, the Built Puffs, is they're always made with the collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. So order a box for you and the family. It's a perfect treat. Ditch the calories, the fat, the sugar. Grab yourself a Built Bar. Go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKEDON15, get 15% off your order. Again, promo code LOCKEDON15, 15% off at Built.com.
Okay, so look, I don't want to pretend like this was just all good. Like there was nothing to be slightly concerned about, or that the Lakers just ran the Kings off the court for the important minutes and everything else was hunky-dory. It was not a perfect opener for the Lakers, and certainly some of their deficiencies that we have been concerned about showed up. They shot 23% from three-point range, and that wasn't just the reserves. Again, we mentioned LeBron missed all of his field goals. Kendrick Nunn was 1 of 3. Let's see here. Pat Bev was 1 of 3. Austin Reeves was 1 of 3. So
Pat Bev, man, before this game, he needed to mix in a few decaf Red Bulls. Like, that guy,
he was a little jittery. Like Pat Bev and Thomas Bryant, who has also a very a high. Thomas Bryant, very active, not very fluid. A lot going on there. Like, there's a lot of energy that seeps through your television screens. There's no question about that. I do appreciate how Cole Swider. If Cole Swider has 10 branches on his decision tree, how many of them are shoot, do you think?
I would say 9 are shoot. 10 is a branch that's still growing towards shoot,
which I respect. I like this about Cole Swider. So all of that stuff, they didn't shoot the ball well. The offense, generally, both offenses look terrible. It's hard to tell how much of that is good defense, how much of that is first preseason game. But the Lakers shot 31% from the floor. And that wasn't just based on the second half where they scored 29 points. I think they were in the low 30s for the first half as well.
They were.
So, it was not a pretty evening of basketball. It was just not the unmitigated disaster to the 30-point loss after last season, plus an 0-6 preseason last year would suggest. And so the other thing that definitely stuck out, Darvin mentioned it after the game, the rebounding. It was a concern. The Lakers got better at center. The one thing that the two centers that they signed are not particularly good at is rebounding. The Lakers, I think they only ended up giving up 12 or 13 second chance points, but that was due mostly to the incompetence of Sacramento as opposed to the competence of the Lakers. They certainly had many more opportunities, Sacramento did, to take advantage of the offensive rebounds. They had 15 of them overall. The Lakers have to do a much better job on the boards, as Pat Bev said last week. Like, you can't run in the way they want to run if you don't rebound.
Well, I mean,
And
there aren't going to be too many games where LeBron and Russ combine for 3 rebounds, even in just like 15 or 16 minutes. Like there was a
no,
lot with
no,
LeBron. There was a lot with LeBron. And I'm not trying to be Pollyanna about this. You are correct. They need to be a better rebounding team, and they don't necessarily project on paper to be a fantastic one. So this is a legitimate issue. It's just worth pointing out, like the two of them on the boards, even in limited minutes, were pretty unproductive.
sure.
Like LeBron in general in this game looked rusty, which I'm fine with. Like, of the 3 members of the big 3, he's the guy that I'm least concerned about in terms of how he looks, as long as he doesn't look like he's on the verge of his body failing. I'm not worried
He'll be
about
fine.
LeBron.
Right.
Yeah.
Because even if LeBron is so good and so talented that even if he is, slightly less effective at the rim, whatever, he'll be fine. I'm not worried. He'll be a big time contributor to what
Right.
they do this year. I'm not
But
concerned.
he looked
He looked a little rusty.
yes. looked like a
He looked
guy
like,
that maybe
he looked like a
spent-
guy who was weighed down by an unnecessary amount of hair on top of his head. Let's just
Yeah.
say that. Get a little more streamlined.
Mhm.
It all gets a little easier. So we'll see what happens on Wednesday and Thursday when the Lakers come back. I suspect, if anybody is going to sit any of these games, it might be in the back-to-back, either the front end or the back end. We'll see how that goes. That's actually a perfectly reasonable precaution for the preseason. I don't have a problem with it as much as
LeBron,
we
AD, and Russ may all have been fasting for Yom Kippur. So
Possibly. We don't know. We're not sure. So.
No. I don't want to report anything out of school.
It is not. Look, if they had media day on Rosh Hashanah, they play on Yom Kippur. It is not a Jew-heavy league.
No, it really isn't. No,
it is not.
And you know what? And a couple of the Jews covering the team were there anyway.
Yeah. So I.
Everybody's on the same page.
We'll get into this Indiana. We'll get into this Indiana stuff for a couple minutes before the break here. So. We joked, Andy, when the Lakers pushed back the pre-media day press conference with Darvin Ham and Rob Pelinka, that maybe this was just that much more evidence. Like, they're trolling Lakers fans again, and maybe the Russ deal is finally happening, and they don't want to, have this thing and then turn around and trade Westbrook. It turns out that actually was not that far from the truth. The Athletic reporting this from Sam Amick and Shams Charania and Jovan Buha that the Lakers really were considering the Indiana deal and giving up those 2 first round picks for Buddy Hield and Miles Turner all the way up until media day. And
the second media day, not even the pre-media day that we talked about that got delayed, the Pelinka Ham press conference. We're talking like the actual media day, like,
right.
Maybe a couple hours leading up to it.
The Rosh Hashanah media day.
Yes.
Happy New Year. Apples and honey for everyone. So
5783.
Hang a banner. So I was, so I thought that was pretty fascinating, only because I think at different times in the summer, we've known that they have been giving a lot of consideration to this trade, but that they were that close to doing it up until like literally everybody shows up in the building. At the very least, Andy, it certainly goes to show they're willing to do it. They're not holding on here because I think they hope it works out with Russ, and that's certainly something that came out in the reporting, that they feel like they still have keeping all of their options open, which could still include that deal or different permutations of it. Buddy Hield by himself, Miles Turner by himself. All of this was apparently discussed, adding a third team. But I think the Lakers still feel like it's still available, as well as everything else that might come along over the course of the year.
Well, I mean, there was a couple things about it. I mean, a lot of what was in this report, and it's really, really well detailed. And Jovan Buha, Sam Amick, Shams Charania, all from the Athletic, did a great job just laying out a bunch of details. A lot of this is stuff that we've known about in terms of the conversations and the mutual interest in it, but like some of in terms of just how close, but also who was involved and the parameters of making it happen or not making it happen, I thought were really interesting. For example, the idea that, Darvin Ham, Genie, Rob Pelinka, presumably Kurt Rambis, but also Joey and Jesse Buss were all part of these conversations together. Apparently, there was a consensus that was desired to make this happen, and the consensus wasn't reached. We don't know who was in favor, who was opposed. It was reported that LeBron did put some pressure on the team to make the deal, which could explain, if nothing else, Rob Pelinka's long soliloquy during media day explaining both the willingness to include those 2 picks in a deal, but also explaining all the billions of reasons that it's complicated and the Stepien rule and yada, yada, yada. But there might have been a little bit of explaining the process, not just to us, but reminding LeBron of it. But the idea that this will be there maybe in a month, there's some truth to that. You obviously don't want to fall into a hole before
a
that
month,
concludes.
2 months.
Well, it's
3 months, 4 months.
Here's the thing, though. I don't think you can go 3 or 4 months. I think that's a dumb way to do this.
Hold on a second. Explain why. Because this is essentially the calculus that the Lakers are making, is that they can wait and not necessarily be worse off and potentially be better off based on what, what was it? It was a Dr. Teeth said, I hope that something better comes along, Muppet movie style. It's a poll. It's a very popular movie. People love the Muppet movie. But explain, no, absolutely not. That is not cone of shame worthy. I disagree. But explain what you're thinking next. Explain why you think the Lakers are wrong if they think they can. I assume you mean sort of revisit or just kind of wait on this Russ thing 2, 3, 4 months, whatever it might come along.
Because the odds of implementing Buddy Hield and Miles Turner in mid-February and getting yourself up to speed to the level of contention that you would hope for by bringing in those guys in the first place, I think the odds of that are somewhere between low and non-existent. You're basically giving yourself 2 months to take a brand new roster and make it as good as the Warriors and the Clippers and the Nuggets and the Grizzlies and all the Mavericks, all this loaded West that we've talked about that is going to be very good, health presumed for all those teams. I think that is frankly naive to think that you can do that over 2 months. I kind of feel like if you've waited that long, you might as well just wait out all of your options. I can understand waiting, say, 2 to 3 weeks, giving yourself an idea of what does it really look like with Russ and this new group with Darvin Ham, but also, too, maybe waiting for Indiana to just fall off a cliff in like 3 weeks, and maybe they become a little bit more flexible in terms of what they'll give you. But to me, the idea of waiting all the way to the deadline, that's a terrible strategy. If you're going to do that, write it out and give yourself the most flexibility in the offseason, because I'm willing to bet that, I mean, unless you're just doing this trade for the 2023-2024 season, in which case, why aren't you just doing it now? I think the idea of waiting to the deadline is too cute by at least half.
Quick thing from the Department of Corrections and Retractions. I hope that something better comes along was Kermit and Rolf as opposed to the Electric Dr. Teeth Band or whatever it was. So my apologies to all above. Now that is worthy of the cone of shame. I agree. If you're going to make the reference, it needs to be correct.
That being said, though, in terms of them waiting for a few weeks and maybe trying to get, a better deal for whatever they want, whoever they want from Indiana, I think one of the upsides, though, is waiting, say, a month into this. If you end up having to give up those 2 picks, they were the 2 picks you were going to have to give up regardless. So you don't really lose anything as long as you don't fall too far in the standings.
Oh, you're probably not losing. I mean, there's presumably the same deal. I mean, Indiana, the through line through all the reporting, and it continues through these stories, is Indiana always ends up wanting the same thing, which is both first round picks, 27 and 29, the Lakers can offer unprotected. And so if that's ultimately what the Lakers end up surrendering, you're right. They don't lose anything booty wise in terms of like what they have in terms of treasure. I know we were told not to make it blue. I mean booty in a pirate sense. No, Andy. Come on. But I think that the question that they're grappling with, and I think ultimately, and I would love, like we said before, to find out when they brought in everybody to vote this time, who voted for what, and how much consensus is required for consensus. I think what they're ultimately concerned about is that what they would do with the Hield and Turner deal is lock themselves into kind of a perpetual 6 seed. There's an argument to be made that once you make those deals, you don't have anything left. A more open-minded person might say,
the argument would be made because they don't.
Well, no, but then you could say, well, you have the option of trading Buddy Hield. You have the option of trading Miles Turner. But I think the struggle,
you're just spinning wheels. I mean, like you're not doing anything.
The struggle to acquire them for what you gave up just shows you, like, so you're gonna spin them for what, like another first round pick in 2038. I mean, like it's you are like it's like, not.
What are you doing? Like at that,
what are we doing here?
Right. I mean, if you're gonna be doing that, then just trade AD, trade LeBron, and just start a rebuild. Like seriously,
who among us believes that people know, like the red paperclip story, like where the person starts with a red paperclip and they just keep trading it for things that are slightly better until they end up with like a new Porsche. Nobody believes that Rob Pelinka is the red paperclip GM. Like nobody believes that. I'm not even sure Rob Pelinka believes that. And so, while
he probably loves the fable, though.
He does. I bet he does. But while I often criticize Rob for being really uncreative, at least I think he recognizes his own limitations in that regard. It's interesting too, and I had this conversation with somebody at Media Day. I actually think another Jew, for what it's worth, another guy who was there roped into the holiday, another one of us, who said something very interesting, that it's not, because we talk a lot about the Lakers tax, and that teams try to extort the Lakers because they're the Lakers, which sometimes I guess can be true.
It's a bad time to be doing that. They don't have anything. Jokes on all these other teams.
That's right.
How you like us now?
Maybe that was Rob's plan. But what he said was, what a lot of teams are trying to do is actually not so much a Lakers tax, but a Pelinka tax, because they know he is kind of desperate to keep his job. Like he needs to, that there's a sense that he is GMing for his job, and there's a sense that he's not very good at it. And so again, this is one conversation with one person, granted a smart person, but just one person. And I thought, wow, like that is a really interesting wrinkle to this whole thing, that the Lakers might, Pelinka is being kind of punished for his own track record in a lot of ways. So, and again, I'm not sure what that translates into, only because they still don't have anything to give anyone. Like they can't, other than like a second round pick or something. They don't have a lot of extra stuff to throw into any deal, even if you think you could get robbed to pay a ransom.
You know who never got taxed? Jim Buss.
That's right.
Jim Buss never got taxed, Brian. It's interesting, though, that you bring that up, because in this Athletic article that, again, we encourage everybody to read, Jovan Buha has been a friend of the show, as has Sam Amick. There's a paragraph in there that I thought was really interesting. In the end, the Lakers chose not to make the formal offer after several long debates among the stakeholders, the people that we talked about before, the decision makers, a collaboration that led to a prudent, patient approach to the Pacers conversation. A potential deal would have meant that the Lakers, in effect, would have traded Kyle Kuzma, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, the chance to re-sign Alex Caruso, and 3 first-round picks for Turner and Hield when taking into account the totality of the original Westbrook trade. Now, it's important to remember that it is not spelled out that this is the Lakers front office thought process on this. This was
right for the reason for saying no. It's like, well,
right.
We can't end up with that because right. No,
it's important it's important to make it clear that this was editorializing in the piece, at least potentially. It was not made clear that this was something the Lakers were looking to do. And, it can't be, like sunken costs are sunken costs at this point. You have to make decisions for the best of the franchise moving forward, because it will be impossible to come up with a realistic trade that somehow makes up all that past stuff, which can even include, by the way, the trade chip of Montrezl Harrell, like opting into that deal specifically to get traded somewhere else. In this case, the Wizards. Like, you can throw Trez into that as well. Like, it will be impossible to make all that up through this deal. So the Lakers can't think about it that way. That being said, woof. Whoa. I mean,
remember earlier in the summer when we were kind of looking, the roster was kind of being formed, and then we had some concerns, and you kind of look at the depth charts and it's like, wow, we got some holes here. But then it was like, when it was finally written down, I was like, I don't like it when it's written down. It looks much worse written down than the moral is. Don't write anything down when it comes to the Lakers. Don't write trade scenarios like the results of this sort of tree down. Don't write depth charts. Just don't write anything down. But yeah, it does look bad when you put it on paper. Like, there's no good conclusion to this episode. There are conclusions where maybe they escape in better situation than otherwise, but there's no good outcome because they made their bed with the original deal, which was a terrible trade. And it can only be a terrible trade that can be undone in ways that makes it slightly less terrible. But the consequences are large if you try to undo it. And if you don't try to undo it, as a lot of people have pointed out, that probably means that you are functionally sacrificing, in a lot of ways, a couple seasons, unless a couple crazy things happen this year.
Right, unless they actually play well this season. And again, it should be noted, just to swing this whole thing around back to a place of optimism, the three of them did look considerably better in this game than a lot of what we saw last season. Like, they did.
I mean, not that much better, but better. It was encouraging. They looked way more
comfortable.
I was genuinely thought this. Okay, this is I could get behind this a little bit. So we'll see what happens Wednesday. We'll see what happens Thursday. Lakers have 5 more preseason games, of which I would expect the big 3 and everybody else to play, if not all of them, most of it, because I do think there's at least one set of back. I think there's one more set of back-to-backs in there as well, which is really stupid for the preseason. But at the very least, where they know they have some this week, and you got to be careful. But more to come for Wednesday's show, and then obviously response to the 2 more games this week. So we're in it, Andy. We're in it.
It's nice to be back. It is nice to be back.
Better than just sitting here and guessing and talking about stuff. Now we can watch it, talk about stuff. All right. We'll see everybody next time.